Our political reporter, Adam Reilly, was at the Mass GOP convention over the weekend to see the party anoint their chosen candidate to go up against Democratic incumbent Mark Healey this November. And he joins us now to talk about what the choice of Mike Minogue says about the direction of the party in the state. Good morning, Adam.
Hello, Mark.
So first, for those who have yet to know, tell us who Mike Minogue is.
Mike Minogue is, among other things, a prolific Republican donor, a former head of a medical device company. He led Abiomed, the Danvers-based medical device company, for, I think, close to 2 decades. He is a West Point grad, former Army Ranger, and was at the front of the invasion of Iraq during Operation Desert Storm. So he is all those things. He's also someone who, and this is a little unusual for Massachusetts, he's someone who very much wears his religious faith on his sleeve. Take a listen to a little bit of how he talked about his faith at the convention. I should clarify, this was him talking about after Abiomed was sold to Johnson & Johnson, how he was trying to figure out the next big thing that he was going to do with his life and decided that running for governor was it. But listen to how he framed it.
And this gave me time to pray and reflect on my next purpose. My faith grounds me in humility and a sincere desire to help others. Amen. And I believe all things are possible with God.
And that really stood out to me because I don't think here in Massachusetts we are used to hearing candidates talking about their faith driving their political engagement in the way that Mike Minogue did right there.
So what's his case that he's making against Healey?
Well, it's worth noting that the case made by the 3 candidates who were seeking the party's endorsement, Mike Minogue, Brian Shortsleeve, and Mike Keneally, who ended up not making the primary ballot, they all made a pretty similar case against Healey. They absolutely ripped her for her handling of the migrant crisis. They asserted that the Massachusetts economy is not working effectively for far too many people. They described it as stagnant, as just having a lack of vigor that is not, there is no rising tide lifting all boats, as they put it. They complained about the MBTA Communities Act. Minogue actually got a standing ovation when he promised to repeal the MBTA Communities Act. So that gives you a sense of where they were all coming from. Again, we have a clip of Mike Minogue articulating a little bit of his anti-Healey case, so we can take a listen.
My purpose is to help working people and families that struggle to pay their bills. Massachusetts is working for some, but not all. Overall, Massachusetts is dead last in job growth and second worst in debt per person, which means our governor is overspending and screwing up every industry. And what is frustrating is she still hasn't solved the illegal immigration crisis that has already cost taxpayers billions of dollars.
I wanted to actually circle back for a minute when you mentioned the law that makes denser housing have to be developed near T stations. So I hadn't realized that was such a darling of only progressives, perhaps, in Massachusetts.
Oh, I think that there's a huge, that was a repeated theme at this convention, that people don't like that law. They think it usurps local control. It's sort of a classic conservative position to want local control as opposed to big government mandates. I'm using that phrase in quotes.
Right.
So, yeah, it's definitely a bête noire for the Republican base here in Massachusetts. One other point I should mention, we heard Mike Minogue's assessment of the state economy there. The Healey administration, of course, offers a very different assessment. I talked to a Healey spokesperson yesterday who said the state has added more jobs last year in the first 3 quarters than, the state GDP grew more in the last 3 quarters than in any other state, and that we outpaced the nation in job growth. So they have a very different take on how the Massachusetts economy is working for people.
And of course, we wanted to let listeners hear a lot of Mike Minogue here. There were two other candidates
Yes.
who were looking for the endorsement. One who is completely fallen off the ballot now.
Yep, Mike Keneally.
And so tell us more about this three-way competition and what, in your estimation, gave Mike Minogue such a commanding lead.
Well, the interesting thing about this race was that you had Mike Minogue, who you can't call him a political novice because he has been such a big donor to Republicans, but he's not familiar with being a candidate. He hasn't served in government before. And then you had these other two, Brian Shortsleeve, who ran the T under Charlie Baker, and Mike Keneally, who was Baker's chief of housing and economic development. So you had two veterans of probably the most popular gubernatorial administration in recent memory. I can't remember someone with Baker's poll numbers, but that almost seemed to work against them. Minogue cast himself as someone who could be an effective change agent because he has not been part of the political establishment. So I think that's one of the things that put him over the top. Mike Keneally failing to make the primary ballot, I can't help but link that to the fact that Mike Keneally has never voted for Donald Trump. That became sort of a test at this convention. You had speakers getting up on stage and saying, you know, I proudly voted for Donald Trump 3 times, and that should matter at this convention, or as we try to figure out who's going to represent us. So I think that was definitely a factor. Shortsleeve barely made the primary ballot, but they were all working to frame themselves as very, very conservative, but only Minogue was able to seize on this outsider mantle. He also is a very charismatic figure. He gives an extremely good speech, and I think the fact that he can also spend a lot of money to finance his own campaign. For all those reasons, I think Republicans at the convention saw him as their best bet to unseat Maura Healey this fall.
Okay, and I guess what I want to ask you next is, looking over all you saw and heard at the convention, whence the mass GOP party as we head into this election?
Well, I read one analysis that said that this convention was lighter on proclamations of allegiance to Trump than the previous convention. I'm not sure that I agree with that assessment. There was a moment, the convention took a long time. Proceedings ran hours behind where they were supposed to. And one of the ways they broke it up was having everyone in the hall dance to YMCA with an image of President Trump doing his special YMCA dance where he moves his arms and hands, and a couple people on stage dancing to it, people in the audience dancing to it. So I would say by picking a nominee who has given money to President Trump and is a proud Trump supporter, and by keeping the only person who hadn't voted for President Trump off the ballot, by having people say, I voted for President Trump 3 times and that should matter, I think the party is most definitely at this point the party of Donald Trump rather than the party of Charlie Baker. Didn't hear a lot of nostalgia for the Baker years.